Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines of this hour. As SCO Summit has commenced in full fervor, the leaders at the summit in Tianjin have discussed war, tariffs, and setting a new world order. At the summit, Chinese President Xi has pledged $280 million in grants to SCO member states this year. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told Russian President Vladimir Putin that Ankara is working for a fair and lasting peace in Ukraine, with talks in Istanbul contributing to the effort on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China. The International Association of Genocide Scholars, with 500 members, have passed a resolution declaring that Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide under the 1948 UN Convention. This marks the strongest formal academic condemnation yet of Israel's campaign in Gaza. Unification Church leader in South Korea has stated that she directed the group to bribe former First Lady Kim Kyung-hee and politician Kwon Song-dong, as South Korea faces a widening criminal probe into former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his wife. Former First Lady Kim was indicted on Friday, is accused of accepting $57,631 in bribes. South Korea has suspended its military radio to North Korea for the first time in 15 years as part of efforts to ease tensions with Pyongyang. This is according to Seoul's defense ministry. The broadcast, which included news about the North's regime, South Korean economic development, and K-pop, had been a key tool of psychological warfare. The death toll from a powerful earthquake in eastern Afghanistan has risen to over 800 people now, with most casualties in Kunar province, according to Taliban government spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid. He has also added that about 2,500 people have been injured. A helicopter with 2 crew members and 6 passengers on board went missing in south of Indonesia, and a search operation is now underway, the local rescue agency has said. The aircraft disappeared in the area of Mante V, according to the local rescue agency. A Pakistani military helicopter has crashed in the northern Gilgit-Baltistan region, killing 4 personnel, including 2 pilots, after developing a technical fault, according to a Pakistan military official. The aircraft went down near while flying from Gilgit to Chilas in the strategic mountainous area. The Chinese foreign minister announced that the SCO family has expanded to 27 members, with a decision to merge SCO dialogue partners and observers into SCO partner countries. He has said that this move will provide a strong boost to the economy of member states, adding that the organization will launch a development bank to strengthen infrastructure development. He has confirmed the process has been set in motion, with a formal decision to establish the SCO Development Bank. The minister reiterated the summit's opposition to unilateral trading systems and highlighted its statement in support of a WTO-centered global trade framework. He further added that frequent regional turbulence, rise of anti-globalism has worsened governance deficit. The Chinese foreign minister also added that the summit issued a statement calling on international community to uphold the correct World War II perspective. He concluded that the global governance initiative stood out as a key highlight of this year's summit. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Peter Cordillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities, joins us live from New York. And Andrew Latham, he's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minnesota. And Erik Solheim, he's a former Minister of Climate and the Environment of Norway, joins us live from Malaysia. First, Eric, I would like to come to you for my discussion question. Now, with India and China emphasizing partnership over rivalry at this summit, how should Washington interpret these developments in terms of its Indo-Pacific strategy?
It's time for the United States to understand that we cannot run the world alone. For most of the 21st century, for most of the 20th century, the United States was the dominant power and they could basically decide more or less everything in the world. That time is over. The multipolar world has arrived, and there is hardly any stronger symbolic moment for the multipolar world than the meeting in Tianjin these days, and in particular the meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi. Look, these two leaders are together representing 3 billion people, 3,000 million people. China is growing at 5%. India is the fastest growing economy in the world. The two nations are the leaders in the green development, and they will create a new rules-based order. Both of them, both China and India, want to have a close relationship to the United States and work with President Trump. But the time for the US to be a little bit more modest, to accept global rules, to accept the World Trade Organization, to accept that we are embarking upon a multipolar world, that time has arrived, and Tianjin is the strongest symbol of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric. Now I would like to take Professor Andrew. Andrew, what do you think? Do you agree with Eric, or does this challenge U.S. effort to position India as a strategic counterweight to China? What do you think?
Well, I agree in part where the unipolar moment is well and truly over, and now we're in a multipolar world, and all countries, but especially the great powers, have to navigate that world, and they're going to have to construct an order. Back in 1944, the soon-to-be victorious Allies sat down at Bretton Woods in the United States and devised the so-called Bretton Woods system, what became the World Trade Organization, the dollar as a reserve currency, the International Monetary Fund, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They created a world order which persisted until quite recently. It's in tatters now. What used to be called the liberal international order is now called the rules-based international order, which kind of gives it away. It's no longer what it once was. The old order is dead. The new order has yet to be born. This is a time of monsters, as Antonio Gramsci put it a long time ago. This SCO Summit is not the Bretton Woods analogy. It's not the equivalent of Bretton Woods in 1944. There have been some interesting developments on the margins, as there always are at diplomatic gatherings. The optics are really good for Putin and Modi and Xi, not so good for Pakistan's head of state. But this is tinkering. This is not the creation of a new world order. Why? Because China desperately wants it to be a Sino-centric world order, and India and Russia have no interest in that. And in fact, Russia supported India's accession to the SCO in 2017, specifically and explicitly to provide a counterweight to China, so that it couldn't dominate and couldn't impose this Sino-centric post-Bretton Woods system on the world. So was the summit important? Yes. Were the optics really good for some players? Yes. Were some important things decided? Yes. Was this the equivalent of Bretton Woods in 1944? Absolutely not.
And with that, I would like to go to our other guest, Peter. Peter, what do you think? Do you agree with what just our other guests have said about China and India emphasizing partnership over rivalry, and what will be the effects of that?
Well, there's no doubt that, China and India certainly are major players in the world economies, and there's no doubt that the United States recognizes that. Of course, this SOC summit is obviously showing a sign of unity. If you looked at some of the major papers this morning, the New York Times portrayed a picture of Xi, Modi, and Putin clasping their hands together. That's a sign of unity. Is it a real sign that it could become a threat to the United States in saying enough is enough, and we want to have more to say and have more negotiating power. I'm not too certain about that. Certainly, it could mean that China, India, and Russia could create their own trade deals and sort of basically shy away from the United States. But on the other hand, all three nations, to a certain degree, need a lot of the technology that the United States can offer. And so it's a very complicated situation. But is it showing a sign of unity? Is it showing a sign of saying enough is enough and we need to negotiate? I would answer that by saying yes.
Right. Thank you very much to all our guests for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. At the SCO Plus Summit in Tianjin today, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for promoting a correct view of world to history and opposing Cold War mentality, bloc confrontation, and bullying. His remarks were widely seen as a veiled message to the United States, which has been criticized for its unilateral tariffs, including those targeting China. Xi's comments come amid ongoing tensions with the United States under President Donald Trump, following a major trade conflict in which divides between the two nations had risen above the 100% mark. Let's listen into what the Chinese President Xi Jinping has said.
80年后，和平发展合作共赢的时代潮流没有变，但冷战思维、霸权主义、保护主义阴霾不散，新威胁、新挑战有增无减，世界进入新的动荡变革期，全球治理走到新的十字路口。
Now I would like to go back to our guest discussion. First, I would like to go to Eric for this discussion. Eric, how do you assess what Xi Jinping has said in his remarks towards the U.S.? What do you think?
Look, no one is claiming that this is a Bretton Woods moment. I mean, the genius of Franklin D. Roosevelt in establishing the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions in 1944, 1945 is unparalleled. It was a fantastic development for the world. However, it reflected the world in 1945. We are in a completely different world now. And what we see now is the birth of a new world order. It will be multipolar. United States will remain a major power economically and politically, and in particular military, in this new world order. But China will be on the par with the United States, and Europe, India, but also middle powers like Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, and others will play a key role in this new world. And what is most demanded here are rules. Because the old rules, which were rules of the West, they are gone. We need to establish new rules. And just to mention a few, there must be a fair trade system with rules based on the World Trade Organization. There must be respect for the sovereignty of all nations. Yes, Ukraine, but also Palestine. And there must be a stop in the interference in domestic affairs of all the nations, which in particular the United States has been doing, but also Russia recently have been doing. China and India is not interfering in the domestic affairs of other nations. And at the core of this new world order is the global south, and there are no other nations in the global south as important as China and India, even if others also are important. So China and India, when they work together, have an enormous ability to shape the new world order. Both China and India want to work closely with the United States, want to trade, want to exchange technology, and even want to work with the United States in finding solutions to global wars. So this is not anti-United States, but it's the birth of a new global order, which is not centered on the United States of America.
Right. With that in mind, Professor Andrea would like to hear your point of view. Do you agree with Eric? What do you think? Is this a realignment that we are seeing? What is your take?
My take is I largely agree that, as I said earlier, the unipolar moment is well and truly over, and we're in a multipolar world. And states are figuring out how to navigate that, and some states are trying to figure out what the successor order will be. Donald Trump's vision is a hub and spoke vision, which is not going to work. The United States at the center of the universe, everybody else in bilateral relations doing what Donald Trump and the United States wants. That's not going to work. A Sino-centric world order reflecting China's interests and values, that's not going to work either, because it's going to get a lot of pushback from India, if nobody else, and certainly going to get some pushback from the United States. As I said, the old order is dead. The new order is not yet born. We're in a time of flux, of change, what Gramsci called a time of monsters. All he meant by that was hybrids. People are trying to figure out what the next step is going to be, and they're going to make some mistakes, and there's going to be some exaggerated importance vested in BRICS meetings and SCO meetings and G20 meetings and all of those sorts of things. But I think Eric's broader point is correct, that we are stumbling toward a new world order. It's not going to be American-centric. It's probably not going to be Sino-centric. It's going to be made up of great powers, the U.S., China, India, and middle powers. Not the old-fashioned middle powers like Canada and Australia, but regional great powers like Turkey and Brazil and Indonesia and maybe South Korea. And they're going to be hugely consequential in terms of regional sub-orders, if you like.
Right.
ASEAN is an example of that.
Yes, and Professor, thank you very much for sharing that. Peter, now I would like to come to you. Peter, how significant is the expansion of the SCO to 27 member states? And what challenges might this organization face in integrating such a diverse group of countries under one economic and strategic framework?
Well, I think it's, probably headed in that direction, but I also agree with your previous guest, who basically alluded to the fact that it's not going to be a centric one nation. And I think that that's probably going to be the case. And in fact, just the other day on Friday, the appeals court basically struck down not all, but some of the tariffs that were imposed, basically saying that the president does not have that power. It basically belongs to Congress. And so, this is quite meaningful, because it's quite obvious that it's going to wind up at the Supreme Court. And the decision of the Supreme Court will be the final decision, and will either eliminate some of these reciprocal tariffs, or they will continue. If they are eliminated, that obviously gives a strong hand to India, Russia, and China to negotiate. And so I think it goes back to the fact that eventually there will be some sort of a new order that will bring forth what might be considered a trade fair practice.
Right. Thank you very much to all our guests for staying with us and sharing your insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay on this topic. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has visited Lithuania's border with Belarus for talks with President Gitanas Nausėda. She has confirmed that the EU has channeled 3.7 billion euros from frozen Russian assets to Ukraine and said more support will follow, stressing that Moscow must ultimately pay for the damage it has caused. Lithuanian President Nausėda has said that Lithuania has applied for 8 billion euros in EU funding. with $7 billion to establish and develop its national division by 2030, and $1 billion to strengthen its border through a joint Baltic defense line with Poland. This visit came a day after von der Leyen's plane experienced GPS jamming while en route to Bulgaria. EU officials say Bulgarian authorities suspect blatant interference by Russia. However, Kremlin has just denied the jamming of her plane in a statement. Let's listen into what Ursula von der Leyen has said.
Right now, we take the windfall profits from the mobilized assets and we directly channel them to Ukraine, either for defense matters or for reconstruction matters. So far, 3.7 billion euros have been generated by windfall profits, and more is to come on a regular basis. But we are also reflecting on the next steps and best use of these assets, because one thing is very clear. Russia, the predator, has to be held accountable for what it did, and has to pay for the damage and for the aggression. That has to be the principle, and therefore we are looking into an additional use of the windfall profits that are immobilized.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Peter Caldillo. He's a chief market economist, and Andrew Latham, he's a professor of international relations, and Erik Solheim, he's a former Minister of Climate and the Environment of Norway. Now I would like to start my question with Erik. Erik, what does the EU's allocation of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine signal about its long-term strategy in this conflict? And if this happens, do you think we will see this conflict end anytime soon, or will it elongate this conflict?
To support Ukraine?
Yes.
I think, in my view, it's good that Europe is supporting Ukraine. What is wrong is that Europe is seeing the entire world with a Ukraine lens, as if the entire world was an appendix to Ukraine. There are many conflicts in the world. We have a horrible war in Sudan. There's conflict in Myanmar and in the Congo. Of course, Middle East and Gaza we see every day. It's not that Ukraine is the one and only war in the world, as it very often is portrayed in Europe. We have a number of wars, and we should try to bring all of them to a close, and we should defend the sovereignty of both Ukrainians as well as Palestinians. But Europe is right to support the independence of Ukraine. What is not right is, as I just said, to see everything as an appendix to Ukraine. And of course, the way Europe has acted in relationship to the United States is absolutely shameful, very short-sighted. Seeing this photo of all the top leaders of Europe sitting at the teacher Trump's desk in the White House as they were small school children, I think was an offense to most Europeans. Europeans want Europe to work with the United States, but we don't want to be seen as serfs, as slaves, as a tail to the United States, and that was what that photo signaled. Because, for two reasons: because Europeans were desperate to get American support for Ukraine, and because Europeans were desperate for a trade deal with the United States. But everyone knows that next week, next month, Trump will come up with some new issues, which will put, again, Europe on the back foot, unless Europe stands up and shows its own agency and creates respect by others and self-respect for itself.
Right. And Professor Andrew, what is your take? How might this financial support influence the dynamics on the ground? And what about what our other guest, Erik, just mentioned, that some Europeans in Europe might hesitate such kind of support because it will be, again, backing U.S.'s alliance or U.S.'s arms deal and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I can't disagree terribly much with Erik's comments and take. The Europeans, like the Japanese and the South Koreans, rolled over when Donald Trump issued some of his ultimata, shall we say. And that emboldened him. And when he bumped into Modi in India, of course, he got a lot of pushback and he didn't react well to that. And so, it matters. It also matters I don't think the diversion of these funds to Ukraine is going to be decisive in any way, shape, or form. There's more or less stalemate on the battlefield. The core issues on both sides are non-negotiable. I think perhaps the best we can hope for is a Korea-like outcome, in which we have a ceasefire that lasts now in Korea 70 plus years. It's not perfect. There's no resolution of the core issues. There are some important differences. There's a U.S. security guarantee for South Korea, 28,000 troops. That's not going to happen in Ukraine, but it's a kind of a model that we might want to pursue. More broadly speaking, I think Europe, like many other countries, political actors, not countries, has to find a way to navigate and negotiate this new evolving world order. What is the relationship going to be with the United States? How is it going to position itself vis-a-vis China? Again, Eric's correct that for most of the world, the war in Ukraine is just another European war. They don't really care about it that much. They've got their own regional conflicts that they're more focused on. And so they kind of resent, my sense is, the sense that the Ukraine war is the be-all and end-all, the most important thing in the world. I will say this about the SCO. President Putin was allowed to narrate the Russian perspective, that this is all about NATO expansion. It's about the Maidan uprising, as he put it, coup, as he called it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody said boo. No pushback whatsoever. Now, if that's the kind of value that's going to be built into this SCO-initiated world order, it's not the kind of world most countries want to live in. Cutting against that, of course, President Xi has talked about the inviolability of borders and the sovereignty of nations, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, he's slipping dual-use technology and diplomatic cover to Russia in this war as well. So sometimes one has to be careful about what one asks for in this world.
Yes, definitely. That was interesting. And thank you very much, as always, Professor Andrew Latham, for joining us, and also Eric Solheim for joining us and sharing your insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Middle East. Amid heightened regional tensions, thousands of mourners gathered in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, to attend the funeral of 12 senior Houthi officials, including Prime Minister Ahmed Ghalib al-Rahwi, killed in an Israeli airstrike last week. The strike comes as leaders convene for the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, where regional stability and security are a part of the agenda. Acting Houthi leader Mohammed Miftah has accused the coalition of foreign intelligence agencies of orchestrating the attack and vowed retaliation. The Houthis have also detained multiple United Nations personnel in Sana'a, raising further international concern. This is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates and the special coverage of the SCO Summit. Stay tuned.